The winning blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
While you're here, go ahead and sub up.
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. Today, we find out what's new in Detroit, or as I like to call it, Detroit. And there was a huge mix-up as to who was supposed to be next on this series. And let me explain the dynamic here. There are count them, two major components to ensure that your team or whatever team you want to see is next up on the What's New in series. Component number one, you must be the first to leave a comment at the bottom of the video stating that you want to see X said team next, which is the second component. Your post must contain the word next in it somewhere. That's the two stipulations to have your team be next on this segment. I had a YouTube subscriber by the name of Mexicano5150 come up and he put JETS, Jets up in the post. And he was the first to post, but he did not put the word next. So technically, his team is not next. I feel really bad about that because it's like Jeopardy. You got the right answer, but you didn't say who or what is. And so I can't give you credit for it. Much like Jeopardy, I cannot allow Mexicano5150 and his Jets to be next. So YouTube subscriber Robbie Sohal asks for the Lions. He had all of the criteria met. And so here we are, Detroit Lions up and running. So we'll be talking about what's new in Detroit today. And so there is a lot that has changed in Detroit, but not as much as you would think. From a team that goes from 10-6 playoff berth to the very next year, cellar, basement of the division, 4-win team, it's hard to see how that happens. Hard to fathom how the Detroit Lions fell off of the NFL landscape that quickly from year to year. It's a year-to-year league. It's a week-to-week league. And I think the Detroit Lions right now are the poster child for that, because you thought that maybe, just maybe, if the Lions could play a little better defense and they continue to click on all cylinders offensively, hey, this is a team that you're going to have to deal with in the NFC. And all of a sudden, these guys can't score points. They can't win close games. They're being outcoached. And next thing you know, they're a 4-win team in the bottom of the NFC North. And so let's talk about what's new in Detroit. But in order to talk about what's new in Detroit, first we got to get rid of the old. So let's go out with the old in Detroit. So in order to talk about what's new in, out with the old, all of that good stuff, I need the assistance of course, my big board behind me. But I also need the assistance of my handy dandy pointer. I've got both. So that means I'm ready to talk some Detroit Lions football. You look at the out with the old column and it's very extensive, but when you really delve in deep to this column, and I was a victim, definitely guilty here, of thinking that the Lions were purging this roster. In the offseason, it just seemed like player after player after player was no longer on this Detroit Lions roster. And I said, man, this is a byproduct of these very hefty contracts. You can't sign anybody back to your team, and you can't go out and get free agents when you're tied up in as much money with two players as the Lions were with Matthew Stafford and Megatron. And so I felt like, man, they're going to have a team of 6 players, 2 of them being Stafford and the other being Megatron, because they don't have any money to pay anybody else. But that's not the case. It was a lot of dead weight on this football team. And that's how you lose 12 games, with dead weight. Guys that get injured, and they had some really key injuries on this football team, ones that a lot of people don't talk about. And it seems like it's kind of irrelevant, but it's not. It affected his team. And they also have a lot of guys that, frankly, they don't need. And they had to shed that dead weight. And sometimes less is more. And you have addition by subtraction. And I think that's what you have here with the Detroit Lions. Let's start with running back Javid Best. He was just released a day ago. And it's sad because here's a guy with a promising career in the National Football League. He got off to a blistering start in Detroit. And he was exactly what the doctor ordered for this Detroit Lions team. They needed a guy to come in and give them some burst out of the backfield. Javid Best was exactly that. And then those concussions caught up with him. And we all know about the huge concussion that he had at Cal, the one that kind of set him back and set him up for where we are now in his career. And I think he's done playing football. I don't think Javid Best will ever play professional football again. And it's unfortunate, but that's what concussions can do to you, especially when you have catastrophic ones like the one he suffered at Cal. And so he's no longer on your football team, a guy that you saw flashes of brilliance from, but never really got to tap into the whole entire spectrum of what Javid Best could have been in the National Football League. You look at running back Kevin Smith. Here's a guy that the Lions drafted early on in the draft. I believe he was a first-round selection. And you never got first-round production out of this guy. And it seems like that's always the case with the Lions with running backs. You remember Kevin Jones. You get Kevin Smith. Now Javid Best. You get all of these backs early on in the draft. And for some reason, one or another, it doesn't matter if it's concussions or spotty play or knee injuries. Whatever the case may be, you don't get everything that you expected out of these guys. And Kevin Smith is another one of these running backs that you got early on in the draft, expected him to be a guy that could play for the Detroit Lions organization for 7 to 10 years and be a very productive back in this league, and he just wasn't. I think he was a byproduct of simply getting the football too much in college. I mean, he was a workhorse in college. And I think that shortens your career. It shortens your shelf life in the National Football League when you are getting the football 300 times in college every single year. And it seems like that's what was happening at UCF when Kevin Smith was the primary ball carrier in college. And so I think his tires were worn down when he got to the National Football League. And you got a back that wasn't explosive, that couldn't get to that next level, that was solid. He was a 3 yards in a cloud of dust back, but that's not what you draft in the first round. That's not what you draft in the second round. You draft guys that can make things happen early on in the draft, not guys that can get 3 yards when a play is blocked for 3 yards. You want the guy that takes that 3-yard gain and turns it into a 33-yard gain. Kevin Smith was never that guy. And every time you had a slew of injuries, you just picked up the phone and called Kevin Smith up, and he came running, and he was your running back from that point on. I don't think he'll be back this time. I think Joyke Bell played really well last year. So did Mikael LaShore. Now you have Reggie Bush. I don't think you'll see Kevin Smith in a Lions uniform again. You look at wide receiver Brian Robisky. He was a guy that you just were looking for bodies at the end of 2012 across from Calvin Johnson. You didn't care who it was. Just put on a Lions jersey, go out there, catch a few passes, and we'll call it a day. And Brian Robisky was one of those guys out there catching passes toward the end of the season. You didn't expect a lot from him, and you didn't expect him to be around after the 2012 season. And here we are, he's not around. So you look at wide receiver Kasim Osgood, core special teamer. This guy made a living in this league playing special teams. I don't even know why he's classified as a wide receiver, because he is a special teamer. His classification should be ST for special teamer, because this guy is a special teams fiend. That's what you call him, a fiend on special teams. He's the first down there. He's the first to make tackles. He makes the Pro Bowl annually on special teams. He did not make it in 2012, however, but he's made a living playing special teams. He's no longer on your roster, so you're going to have to find guys to fill that void. left by Kasim Osgood because he is one heck of a special teams player. You look at wide receiver Stephon Logan. Here's another guy that's classified as a wide receiver, but he's really not. He's more of a running back. I mean, how many receivers do you know that are about 5'5"? I don't know of many, if any. And so Stephon Logan is more of a specialist, a guy that returns kickoffs for you. You stick him in the game, and he's a gadgety guy, someone that's in the backfield, and you might throw a little slip screen too, or you put him out wide and he's catching a wide receiver screen. He's not a guy you line up and he's actually running a route in the route tree. And so Stephon Logan was a returner, was a gadget guy. It didn't really manifest itself to anything in Detroit. He fumbled the football a few times. He never really broke off big returns. He may have had one here and there, but the fact of the matter is Stephon Logan was an average football player for you, and you're looking for someone dynamic in the returns game, and he was not it. He's no longer on your roster. You look at tight end Will Heller, blocking tight end. Every team needs one. He was yours. He's now gone. He was also a guy that could catch the occasional pass, though. Will Heller was a little bit better than your average run-of-the-mill blocking tight end because he could catch it too out of the backfield, but he's a guy that was an exceptional blocker. He's no longer on your football team. Go find yourself a new blocking tight end. You look at offensive tackle Jeff Backus. You think Detroit Lions, you think of a few guys. He's one of them, someone that you knew every single week was going to be out at the left tackle position. You line up, you put your 5 guys on the offensive line, and every single week you knew Jeff Backus was going to be one of them. And that's a luxury that a lot of teams don't have. A guy that they know, hey, I don't have to worry about him. He'll play every single week. And he did it for about 10 years for the Detroit Lions. Really, really solid player all the way through his career. And he decided to hang his cleats up. He's retired. So no more Jeff Backus for the Detroit Lions. It was a good run. He was a really solid player for a long time. Jeff Backus no longer on your football team. You look at offensive tackle Gosher Charles, and here we are, losing another tackle in Detroit. And I was worried that the Lions were going to lose a lot of their players along their offensive line. And Gosher Charles wasn't the best right tackle in the world, but he was extremely solid, and he was your right tackle. And so I thought that was a guy worth holding on to. And yeah, he can get a little grabby at times. And yes, he isn't the most athletic tackle in the world, but again, he was a solid tackle, a guy that did his job and did it well enough to protect Matthew Stafford. And I thought he should have been back. And I thought that the Lions could have extended him an offer, but he ended up signing with the Indianapolis Colts. He's no longer on your roster. Now you're going to have to insert Riley Reef. He's going to have to be a starter at one of your tackle positions. I'm assuming you're going to try Riley Reef out at left tackle, and now you're going to have to get yourself a right tackle. We'll see how it all shakes out in Detroit in 2013. You look at offensive guard Steven Peterman. He's now in New York with the Jets. Solid guard on the interior of your offensive line. Again, here's another piece of your line being removed. I think that the Lions feel really confident about some of the guys they have waiting in the wings, however. And so a guy like Steven Peterman leaving your offensive line does leave a void, but the Lions, I think, have guys that they feel good about, like Jason Fox, who can either play tackle or guard. And I think they'll slide someone in, and a guy like Steven Peterman leaving won't be felt as much in 2013. You look at a cornerback, Kevin Barnes. Here's the guy who came over from the Washington Redskins, played 2 games for you, and then he was gone. So it was one of those hocus pocus type of deals. Now you see him, now you don't. But guess what? You won't miss Kevin Barnes anyway. You look at cornerback Drayton Florence, veteran corner. I thought that he was way past his prime when you got him, and I thought he's a solid guy in the locker room, solid veteran that can show the young guys how to mature as a cornerback in this league. He's been in this league for a while, but Drayton Florence is no longer an asset out wide. And if you're going to play this guy, he needs to be in a nickel. He needs to be in a dime package. You don't want Drayton Florence starting out wide for you. And a couple of times you found yourself in sticky situations where Drayton Florence was on the field maybe a little bit more than you would have liked. And that was part of the problem in Detroit in 2012. Too many guys on the field that you would have preferred not be on the field. a lot of injuries, a lot of different things, a lot of circumstances put you in situations where your back was against the wall and you had to put guys in the game, and it backfired. And I thought Drayton Florence was one of those guys that you would have preferred to have seen play in nickel or dime or quarter situations. Instead, this guy was on the field in some base sets sometimes, and guys ran by him. Guys ran by him, and they ran by some of your other corners, Lacey. You had a lot of guys out there that were getting their feet wet too, like a Bill Bentley. And so there were a lot of guys in transition. I think Drayton Florence is a guy that you can do without. And in this league, there are a lot of ordinary corners. You can find those guys anywhere, dime a dozen. You don't need aging veteran corners like Drayton Florence to hold up a roster spot if he's going to be ordinary. You can find a young 26-year-old corner to do that. You don't need an aging veteran to be that guy that's getting beat out there. If you're going to get beat, might as well be with athletically gifted and young, talented corners. Why not? So Drayton Florence no longer on your roster. You look at Jacob Lacey. Here's a guy that came over from the Indianapolis Colts, was solid in Indy, but he's more of a boundary corner, a guy that can play zone coverage really well. You put him in man coverage, and it gets a little dicey. And so Jacob Lacey is a guy that I didn't think was going to really flourish in Detroit. They play a lot of man coverage in Detroit. They do play zone. They do mix it up. Gunther Cunningham, your defensive coordinator, loves to be aggressive. And when you're aggressive, a lot of times man coverage is behind that aggressiveness. Jacob Lacey isn't a guy that flourishes in man-to-man coverage, and so he's no longer in Detroit. You look at cornerback Pat Lee. Veteran corner, not really good. Let's move on. You look at linebacker Justin Durant. Here's a guy that I thought was worth holding on to. He's a high-volume tackler that's extremely athletic. And DeAndre Levy and Justin Durant, I thought, were two of the guys that you could build around at the linebacker position. And I thought you were going to hold on to Justin Durant. And I was wrong. You allowed him to walk away. He's now with the Dallas Cowboys. I really didn't understand the logic there. You held on to DeAndre Levy, but you didn't hold on to Justin Durant, who I thought was just as good as DeAndre Levy in 2012. But it doesn't matter. He's not here. We're not going to cry over spilt milk. But if you're the Lions, you got to hold on to stuff that matters. You can't keep everyone. Again, that goes for every team in the National Football League. You can't hold on to everyone. And yes, you had to pay DeAndre Levy. I don't know if you felt like you couldn't pay both of them. And you did pay DeAndre Levy. But I thought you could have found a way to slide Justin Durant in too. I just thought he was worth holding on to. But he's not. He's in Dallas. You go on to the next guy on this list, and it's defensive end Cliff Averill. Here's another guy that you would have loved to have held on to, but Cliff Averill was unreasonable. And I don't blame you for not having this guy back in Detroit. He wanted big-time, game-changing defensive end pass rusher money. But he has none of those things. He's a guy that can get to the quarterback, and he will get to the quarterback. He'll get you 8.5, 9.5, maybe 10 sacks a season. But you don't get game-changing DeMarcus Ware money. You don't get game-changing, big-time pass-rushing defensive end money like Mario Williams commanded last offseason when you're just getting meager numbers like 9.5, 8.5 sacks. When did Cliff Averill ever get 15 sacks? When did Cliff Averill ever get 18 sacks in a season? When did that happen? Never. And so for him to come out and say, hey, I want to be paid like one of the premium top pass rushers in this league, didn't make any sense. He was being irrational. And when you're irrational, you got to go. I got to show you the door. And so he's now in Seattle, and he did all of that talking, all of that crying to get paid, and the man leaves for a 2-year, $10 million deal in Seattle. What was the logic in that? That was one of those spiteful moves. Hey, you don't want to pay me, I'll just go elsewhere. Fine. Leave. Bye. And I'm pretty sure he could have got more money per year in Detroit than $5 million per year for 2 years in Seattle. I don't understand it. Guess what? Don't care. When you act irrational, you get irrational results. So you look at defensive end Lawrence Jackson, solid rotational depth guy along this defensive line. He's not necessarily going to get to the quarterback. He helps you in the run game. Is a little bit stout at the point of attack there, but he's one of those defensive ends that you can find around the league. You can find anyone around the league to get you 1 to 2.5 sacks, 15 to 30 tackles, and just be average. There's a lot of guys in the league that can do that. So when you see a guy like Lawrence Jackson move on, he's now in Minnesota, you really don't feel that bad about it because there's someone else that can come in and do what he did, and you're hoping can exceed what a guy like Lawrence Jackson was bringing to the table anyhow. You look at defensive tackle Andre Fluellen. He didn't even start the season with you. He was a guy that was in Detroit, left for greener pastures in Miami, found out the grass isn't always greener on the other side, like Cliff Averill will find out. And then he tried to come back. You had him for a couple of games. Now he's gone off your roster. Solid defensive tackle who's a rotational depth guy, no longer on your roster. You look at defensive tackle Sammy Lee Hill. That's a guy you're going to miss. I thought when the injuries hit on this defensive line, when Ndamukong Suh couldn't go, or when Nick Fairley couldn't go, this was the guy that was holding this defensive line, the interior of it, together. He's a big space-eating defensive tackle, not going to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, but he does his job in the run game. I thought with the type of defensive line that you have and the guys that can get to the quarterback, someone like Sammy Lee Hill, who's a polar opposite, a guy that's just looking to stop the run, was a solid guy to have on your football team. And I didn't think he was worth letting walk away. He's now in Tennessee. Again, I feel like the Lions aren't holding on to the right guys. And you let Justin Durant go, okay. You let Sammy Lee Hill go, okay. I don't agree with it, but those are guys that I think should still be in Detroit. They're not, so you move on. Now you go to defensive tackle Corey Williams. That was a guy you gave money to in free agency a few years back. He wasn't the guy that you thought he was going to be, and you no longer have him on your football team, and I don't think you're going to miss Corey Williams all that much. He's a guy that when he's on, he's a force, but he's not on enough. And so Corey Williams is no longer in Detroit. You move on from there. You look at punter Nick Harris. He's been in Detroit for a while, and I can't remember the last time you had a different punter. Nick Harris has been in Detroit for at least 5 or 6, maybe even 7 or 8 seasons. He's no longer on your football team. You're looking to upgrade at the punter position. And it's not hard to find a new punter. Just make sure you find a guy that is extremely solid. The last thing you need is a guy that when you're at the 37-yard line, just slightly out of field goal range, and you got a punt that booms it into the end zone, and the opposing team gets to start at the 20-yard line with a net of about 20 yards on the punt. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Make sure you find a guy that is consistent, that can keep it in bounds, and make guys have to catch the football. So we'll see what you do at the punter position. Kicker Jason Hanson. One of my favorite kickers of all time. Just a quiet, very efficient kicker. The longevity here is ridiculous. We're talking about a guy that had a career that spanned over 2 decades. He played with Barry Sanders in Barry Sanders' heyday. He was the only Lion on the roster before you guys made it to the postseason in 2011 that could say, hey, I was on the team the last time we made it to the postseason, which before then was probably like 1999. And then he could say, hey, I was here the last time we made it before that, which was probably in like 1996 or 95. And so Hanson has seen the good, he's seen the bad, he's seen the ugly in Detroit, but through all of it, he was always consistent. And so you're going to miss Jason Hanson. And I hope the Lions do right by Jason Hanson and give this guy a spot around the field in the rafters somewhere. Hang his jersey up. He deserves to be in the Ring of Fame. This guy has been the consummate professional and one of the better kickers in NFL history. And so kudos to Jason Hanson on a long career. And this guy could have kicked for another 3 years if he wanted to. he decided to hang it up. I wish Jason Hanson all the best. He was a solid kicker for many, many years in Detroit. So that's out with the old in Detroit. And see, when you went through that list, it wasn't all bad. I mean, a lot of these guys you can do without. I really felt like throughout this whole list, there were about 3 players. 4, if you want to throw Jason Hanson in there, and he retired. So 5, because I should add Jeff Backus in there too. He retired as well. 5 players that, if they wanted to come back, you would have welcomed them with open arms. You could throw Cliff Averill in there if you want as well, but he was being unreasonable, and you can't reason with people like that. You got to let them walk away. And so Samuel Lee Hill for me, Justin Durant, Jeff Backus, Jason Hanson, all guys that you would have loved to have had back, as well as Gosher Cherilus. But all these other guys to me were just dead weight, holding the Detroit Lions down. Now they're gone. You can kind of spread your wings a little bit, breathe a sigh of relief, and now go on and try to win some football games. Let's go in with the new in Detroit. So now we're in with the new in Detroit, and you start with Reggie Bush, running back, comes over from the Dolphins. I think this is a huge offseason acquisition. Anytime people talk Detroit Lions football, that's the first name they bring up is Reggie Bush and the impact that he could have on this roster. First things first, Reggie has to stay healthy. He's done a really good job of that over the last 2 seasons in Miami, but we all know Reggie has a history of getting injured. If he can stay healthy, he's going to bring an element to this offense that you have lacked since Javid Best went down. I thought Mikel LaShore and Joyke Bell last year were fabulous as a tandem in the run game. I didn't think that the running game was that bad in Detroit last year. The only problem I have is neither one of those guys have game-breaking, game-changing speed. You can let them bust off a 25-yard run. They're not scoring a touchdown, though, because they're not going to accelerate away from the defense. With Reggie Bush, he gets out in open space. That's when he's his most dangerous and electric. And so he's going to really come in and give this offense a different dimension that they lacked in 2012, something that they need. They need a guy that can do some things out in space. Get him the football on a swing screen. Get him the football on a regular screen. Get him the football on a middle screen. Get him the football on a draw. Get him the football on a one-on-one isolation route with a linebacker. He's going to win that 9 times out of 10. And so Reggie Bush is a guy that you can find ways to get him the football, and he's going to really help you, because there's nothing better for a quarterback than to throw a 2-yard pass and have it go 78 yards for a touchdown. Just feels great. Pads your stats, nice and easy. You don't have to do a lot of the work. And that's what Reggie Bush can bring to this team. A guy that is explosive, that can make things happen. I look for Reggie Bush to really have a huge impact on this team in 2013. You look at fullback Montel Owens. He's coming over from Jacksonville. Solid guy. Really can carry the football as well. He did a lot of that in Jacksonville last season in that running back by committee group they had going on without Maurice Jones-Drew. And so he can run the football from the fullback position. He can block. He can catch it as well. So he's a solid acquisition in addition to this football team. You look at wide receiver Michael Spurlock. He comes over from San Diego. Don't think he's much of a threat as a receiver. Think he's more of a special teams guy. He's not someone that adds a lot of value to your receiving corps. So I'm thinking this is a guy that you're looking to come in and help kind of deaden the impact of that Kasim Osgood free agent departure, because I don't think that Michael Spurlock is a guy that's going to help you all that much at receiver. You look at wide receiver Matt Willis, and I think he's the same type of guy as Michael Spurlock, a guy that doesn't do a lot for you as a receiver, but can help you. And I think Willis, more so than Spurlock, helps you on special teams. And so one of these guys is going to make your roster. The other is not. I put my money on Matt Willis making this roster because of what he brings on special teams more so than Michael Spurlock. You look at offensive guard Jake Scott. It was amazing to me that this guy was on the street midway through the 2012 season. He played some really good football for the Colts and the Titans, and then all of a sudden, he just didn't have a job. And I couldn't understand it. The Eagles picked this guy up midseason, and he comes in and he plays fabulous for them. I mean, he was one of their better offensive linemen on an offensive line that was putrid in 2012. And so He benefits from that. He moves on from the Eagles. He now gets a job here in Detroit. He's going to help the interior of your line. And like I said, you lose a guy like Steven Peterman. Here's a guy like Jake Scott comes in and can help you right away. I like this acquisition a lot. You look at guard Leroy Harris. He's another guy that's a veteran coming from the Tennessee Titans, can help you a lot on the interior of this line. I expect him to be a guy looking to start on the interior of this line. And I think Leroy Harris is a guy that can help you just like I think Jake Scott can help you. I think these are all upgrades on your offensive line, and these are guys that can come in and play some really good football for you and still have a lot of mileage left in those tanks. And so I feel like these guys are really solid acquisitions to your football team. Look at offensive guard Bill Nagy. He played with the Dallas Cowboys last in 2011, did not play in the 2012 season. And so I'm looking to see what he can bring to the table. You still don't know what Bill Nagy is. He was okay at best for the Cowboys in 2011. I don't think he was that good for the Cowboys. And so I'm anxious to see how he looks in preseason. Does he fit in well with the scheme? Is he athletic enough to do all the things that your offensive coordinator, Scott Linehan, is going to ask him to do? I want to see if Bill Nagy will fit in because he's younger than a Leroy Harris or Jake Scott. And so he might be a guy that you could be grooming for the future. We'll see in Bill Nagy. Safety, Glover Quinn, one of your biggest offseason acquisitions. He's right up there with a Reginald Bush in terms of guys that you brought in and really went after in free agency. Glover Quinn is a guy that can help you change the game at the safety position. If you can get Louis Delmas to stay healthy, which you just got to cross your fingers on that one because it seems like Louis Delmas is in that same mold of a Bob Sanders. When he's in the game, he's effective, but he's so small, he plays so recklessly and physical that his body just isn't made to hold up to that kind of punishment. Louis Delmas is always injured, but if he can stay healthy and you add Glover Quinn across from him, you could have one of the better safety tandems in the league. Glover Quinn is a guy that makes plays. He can catch the football. He forces fumbles. He can tackle. He does it all. I like this acquisition. And guess what? He's extremely young going into the prime of his career. So this is a heck of a pickup for the Detroit Lions. Look at safety, Chris Hope. You go from one end of the spectrum in a very talented, young, and going into the prime of his career safety to a guy that's at the other end of the spectrum. Old, aging veteran at the end of his career. A guy that can help you as a veteran in a platoon type of role. He can come in and help you in the box. Chris Hope is an in-the-box safety at this point of his career. He's not running anyone down. He's not covering any half of the field or third of the field or quarter of the field. He's a guy that you just want to help you in the run game, on special teams. Chris Hope can do all of those things, fill in a pinch at the safety position, but you do not want Chris Hope out in space. You put him in the box, he can help you. You put him out in space, he's a fish out of water at this point of his career. You look at linebacker Corey Greenwood. Comes over from the Kansas City Chiefs. Special teams player only. Can help you on special teams. Don't look for him to help you anywhere else. You look at defensive end Jason Jones. Very versatile defensive lineman. He can play inside at defensive tackle. He can play outside at defensive end. When he's inside at defensive tackle, he's a mismatch because he's long. He's a guy that's sneaky athletic for his size at 6'5", about 280. He can get inside, knife in the backfield, and make things happen. Problem with Jason Jones is he can't stay healthy. If Jason Jones stays healthy, he's a guy that can be highly productive. If is a huge word. What if my head was turned backwards and I could still see forward? If is a big word. So if doesn't help you if you're the Detroit Lions. You need Jason Jones to stay healthy. If you're looking for this defensive line to have depth, guys like Jason Jones have to stay healthy. So if Jason Jones can do that, you've got yourself a really versatile defensive lineman that can play multiple positions on your defensive line and really create mismatches against offensive linemen. You look at defensive end Israel Adonijah. I thought this was a quiet move at the end of free agency that no one was talking about that could have a very big impact on your season because here's a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback. I don't know what the Bears were thinking here because Israel Adonijah got them 7 sacks last year. And that's nothing to scoff at in this league. If you're getting a guy that can get you 7 sacks and you could platoon in and out of the lineup, I just don't see why you don't bring this guy back. He's solid in the run game, gets pressure on the quarterback. I didn't understand why the Bears didn't bring him back. Their loss is your game. You get Israel Adonijah on your defensive line, and I think he's a guy that can get pressure on the quarterback, is going to help you on this defensive line, and I like the move. So you go to defensive tackle C.J. Mosley, coming over from Jacksonville, solid rotational depth, defensive tackle. Again, you lose Sammy Lee Hill, you're going to have to replace him with someone. I think C.J. Mosley is a guy that could come in and spell some of your defensive tackles on that line. Again, a guy that you ask to play 20 to 25 snaps will help you in that capacity. He's a solid addition to this team, but he's not a guy that I think can hold up like Sammy Lee Hill did. When a lot of guys went down, Sammy Lee Hill was in the interior of that line holding it together. C.J. Mosley isn't that type of guy. He's someone that when your defensive tackles are playing well and they need a breather, you slide C.J. Mosley in and he'll hold up at the point of attack. He won't get pressure on the quarterback, but he'll be solid in the run game. And again, sometimes that's all you need. But I'm a big fan of Sammy Lee Hill. Thought you should have held on to him. You look at kicker David Akers. He had a tumultuous 2012 season. And you go out and get him because for the first time in 22 years, you had to look for a field goal kicker. No more Jason Hanson. So that's foreign to you. David Akers is a veteran that when he's on, he's on. I mean, just 2 seasons ago, this guy set the NFL record for most field goals in a season. And he might have been the MVP of the San Francisco 49ers season in 2011. You fast forward to 2012, and this guy was missing kicks left and right. We found out later that he was injured. But look, in this league, if you're injured, say you're injured. If you want to keep it a secret and you go out and you struggle, people are going to point the finger at you. And that's what happened to David Akers. And so now you question whether it was the injury or is this guy just inconsistent now? You don't know. And the Lions aren't sure of themselves. They have some guys waiting in the wings if David Akers isn't the guy that they think he could be. So we'll see what David Akers does for the Detroit Lions in training camp and into the preseason. If he wins this job, if you're a Detroit Lions fan, you got to hold your breath because you don't know what you're getting out of David Akers. Unless this guy starts out the season 15 for 15, you got to start wondering, I don't know about this guy. He was a little skeptical in 2012. We'll see, though. David Akers has a great track record. If he can get back on track, you got a solid kicker in David Akers. So you go from there to draft picks. And I'm not going to give you an extensive breakdown of these picks. If you're looking for that, I will point you in the direction of my 2013 NFL draft wrap-up that I've done on every single team, including the Detroit Lions. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of each and every single one of these players in the Detroit Lions draft, then go to the 2013 NFL draft wrap-up series. Defensive end Ezekiel Ziggy Ansah was your first-round selection out of BYU. You're looking for him to really do some big things along this defensive line. Cornerback Darius Slay in the 2nd round. Offensive guard Larry Watford in the 3rd round. Defensive end Devin Taylor in the 4th round. Punter Sam Martin in the 5th round. Wide receiver Corey Fuller in the 6th round. Running back Theo Riddick in the 6th round as well. Tight end Brandon Williams in the 7th round, as well as linebacker Brandon Hepburn in the 7th round. So that is the draft for the Detroit Lions. I expect a large portion of this draft to make the team, if not all of these guys. So you go from guys who are probably going to make this team to those who have a very, very small chance of making this team in undrafted rookie free agents. Let's run down the list of these guys very quickly. Running back Stephen Miller from Appalachian State. Wide receiver Cody Wilson from Central Michigan. Tight end Joseph Fourier out of UCLA. Offensive tackle LaAdrian Waddle out of Texas Tech. Offensive tackle Austin Holtz out of Ball State. Center Darren Keaton out of Central Michigan. Defensive back Martavius Nellums out of Kentucky. Linebacker John Morgan out of Albany. Linebacker Alex Elkins out of Oklahoma State. Defensive end Spencer Neely out of Texas A&M. Punter Blake Klingan out of Central Florida. And kicker Havard Rugland rounds out the undrafted free agent rookie pool that the Lions have on this roster currently. I don't know how many of these guys are going to make this roster. Maybe 1 or 2, possibly 3. Don't expect a lot of these guys to make this roster, however, but you just never know in the National Football League if these guys come in, work hard, and the Lions I think, have some space on his roster to fill out with a couple of these guys. So we'll see how the camp shakes out, what injuries dictate, and how these guys perform in the preseason. So that's going to do it for the end with the new portion of this segment. Now we're going to talk about any philosophical changes in Detroit. So we get into any philosophical changes in Detroit, and I think that offensively, things are going to be slightly different. The Detroit Lions threw the football over 700 times last season, and that can't happen again. You can't throw the football that many times in this league. You just have to have more balance than that. And I think Scott Linehan, your offensive coordinator, realizes that. I think Reggie Bush is going to pick up some of that slack that was left by a guy like Javid Best not being able to play in the 2012 season. I think you're going to see a lot of screens trying to get Reggie Bush the football. You're going to see creative ways for them to devise to get Reggie Bush the football. They'll probably take a look at some of that New Orleans Saints film when Reggie Bush, I thought, was at his best. And they're going to get him the football on all kinds of screens, all kinds of misdirection type of plays. And so expect Reggie Bush to be a focal point of this offense. Of course, you're going to get the football to Havertz to Megatron, Calvin Johnson. That's a foregone conclusion. But I think that a guy like Nate Burleson coming back is going to help you tremendously. That was one of those injuries that not a lot of people talked about, but after he left, there wasn't any Robin on his team. There was only Batman. And every superhero needs a sidekick. And there was no way that this offense was going to be able to play at maximum efficiency with no one on the other side to take away some of the attention. You drafted a young guy, Corey Fuller, out of Virginia Tech that you like a lot, and I think he's going to have to step up. And maybe not so much in his rookie season, but over time, he needs to be that guy that you can rely on to take some of that pressure off of Calvin Johnson. But I think this offense is going to look a little bit different. You're going to run the football more. I think Joyke Bell and Mikael LaShore did a great job of running the football. They're going to continue to see the football. Reggie Bush is going to get some carries as well. You're going to see Reggie Bush a lot in this offense. And I think you're going to do things to create mismatches to get him the football. And so I expect this Detroit Lions team to put up more points. Last year, you did not score enough points. That was the biggest problem in Detroit. Was it the offense? You racked up yards as you always do. You went from 20 to 20. Problem was you got in the red zone, had to settle for field goals. Calvin Johnson only had about 4 or 5 touchdowns on the season. That can't happen. You can't have almost 2,000 yards worth of catches and over 100 grabs and only 5 touchdowns. That's not allowed to happen. And so I expect the Detroit Lions to be more aggressive, especially in the red zone. You got to find ways to get that football in the end zone. A guy like Reggie Bush is going to help you in that matter as well. And so look for the Detroit Lions to score more points in 2013 to help take some of the pressure off of this defense. Speaking of defense, we switch gears and go over to the defensive side of the football with Gunther Cunningham and his group. And I think that with the offseason acquisitions made through the draft and free agency, this team is looking to become more stout on defense. I think you can get to the quarterback at the defensive tackle position with the 2 guys that you have. Now you're really looking to solidify pressure by getting a guy like Ziggy Ansah on that defensive line. You're hoping that with the attention that guys like Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley are generating inside, a guy like Ezekiel Ansah will get one-on-one coverage out there, and he's got to win. He's got to win one-on-one matchups. You're looking for your young corner, Darius Slay, to come in and help, along with a guy that you re-signed in Chris Houston, to generate turnovers. You also went and got Glover Quinn, so you're revamping this defense. You want to force teams into mistakes. And the best way to do that, and I always say this, stop the run. Stop the run on first down. Stop the run on second down. Make teams be one-dimensional. Have teams finding themselves against the Detroit Lions in 3rd and 7 or longer, oftentimes. And when you do that, you bend your ears back now. Your pass rushers know they got to pass. There isn't a run-pass option here. They got to throw the football. Now you turn your dogs loose, and hopefully They can get pressure on the quarterback, which will allow guys like Chris Houston, Darius Slay, a guy like Glover Quinn, maybe, just maybe if he can stay healthy, a guy like Louis Delmas to make plays in that secondary. And so if you are the Detroit Lions, the biggest thing for you is health. That's number one. You've been banged up a lot over the last 2 seasons, especially in 2012. You got to stay relatively healthy. If you can find a way to stay relatively healthy, the next thing for you is getting consistency out of your football team, both offensively and defensively. 1 week, you can't score 34 points, and the next week, you can only muster 16. That can't happen. You lost a game to the Minnesota Vikings, and this is an example here. A game where the Vikings didn't score an offensive touchdown. They got a kickoff return from Percy Harvin. They got a punt return from Marcus Sherrills. And they beat you 17-13 because you couldn't generate any points. That can't happen this season. You got to be the Detroit Lions of 2011 that scored points, that put pressure on opposing teams to keep pace. You got to come to Detroit and score points because this Lions team is going to put up 27, 34 points. You got to keep pace. And that's when you get teams to make mistakes because they feel the pressure of, hey, we got to go out and put up points. Then that's when you get them to force themselves into situations where they're not comfortable. They turn the football over and they give the ball back to your offense and you're looking to score more points. And if you're the Lions, that's what you're looking to do in 2013. So those are your philosophical changes in Detroit. That's what's new with the Detroit Lions.
Like the content? Want more? Sub up.